Sometimes during the winter months, I've had this experience of driving my car and there's a lot of snow and just gross stuff on the roads. And then that kind of kicks up and it gets up on the car, on the sides, and on the windshield. And what usually happens is it takes me a while to brush that off. I'll use the windshield wiper fluid, but every time I do that, I realized I've kind of gotten used to the dirtiness of the windshield. Like there's a certain sense of like, oh wow, it can be this, it can be cleaner than that. Like it's better than that. Perhaps you've had that too, and maybe just washing your windows at home. I probably could use the same for my own windows. But we sometimes don't realize it that when we're looking through lenses or we're looking through these barriers that kind of cloud our vision without us knowing it. The world that we live in today can oftentimes cloud our vision from what is true and real. Today there's a lot of talk about blindness and sight in the readings. In the prophet Isaiah, he talks about the day of the Lord is coming and how those who are deaf will hear and the blind will see. And then in the gospel, Jesus heals two blind men who ask him, Jesus, son of David, have pity on us. And so there's a sense of having our eyes opened. During this Advent season, we are to have our eyes opened by the revelation of who Jesus is and who he wants to be for us and his coming into our life, what that really means for us. The culture we live in these days, it is totally opposite of that. It gives us a different narrative. It's kind of like putting on one set of glasses that are distorted, that make us see things in bad ways. And then when we see who Jesus is, the true message of the gospel, we start to see in new ways. It really is like we have gained new sight. Like we are no longer spiritually blind, but we know who Jesus is. This also helps us to see who the enemy is as well, because he is active in the world. He's not a rival to God. He's not one who is somehow battling God at all times, but rather he's one who is always trying to tempt, always trying to make us feel discouraged, to lie to us. And oftentimes we can believe those lies. So the prophet Isaiah says that the tyrant will be no more. The tyrant of sin, the tyrant of the evil one, the tyrant of a world that tells us to think only about ourselves, that'll be gone. But we have to be willing to ask Jesus for that new spiritual sight. We have to be like those two blind men who say, Jesus, have pity on us. We are almost helpless against this at times. It feels that way because I meet people every day who have just only been influenced by the way that the world tells us to see the things, how the world tells us to go about our days. We have to ask Jesus for that new spiritual sight. And Jesus says to those blind men, he says, do you believe I can do this? And they say yes. So that means for us too, we have to believe that Jesus can give us new sight. But we also have to answer another question. Do we want to? Do we want to have that new sight? It's a good reflection for all of us. And as we continue to make our way through this Advent season, let's ask the Lord to really truly give us new spiritual sight so that we might be ready and prepared when he comes.